Jason Taylor.
We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
Not only will this tax plan pay for itself, but it will pay down debt.
There are moral and legal obligation questions that I think we'll have to wrestle with as a society.
When we as people go wobbly on the truth, we go wobbly on America.
All you have to do is look at the numbers, look at what we've done.
And this is only the beginning.
Good morning. I'm your host, Matt Treadwell. This is the Matt Treadwell Hour. Jason's been kicked out of the office. Mary didn't show up, so it's just me today. Just me. And today we're talking about... What are we talking about? Well,
You're listening to Evidence of Design.
You're listening to Evidence of Design. For those of you that don't know, our show is all about discussing income and wealth inequality in the United States. We're living through times of very high economic inequality, and we think there should be less of it. We believe that the driving force behind today's increasing economic inequality is a decades-long push for an unfettered free market and small government that caters to the wealthy. We believe our society should be reorganized to support public interest more than private interest. Thanks for joining us.
Did you really just read the script that was in the document?
Yeah, I don't know what the show is about.
That's amazing. All right. Hey, everyone. Matt, you did a great job. You're listening to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM. WXIR.
I'm done for the day.
That was Matt Treadwell. I'm your host, Jason Taylor, and we're also joined in WXIR studios by my good friend and co-host, Mary Lawrence.
Good morning.
As Matt said, we do critique income and wealth inequality on this show on 100.9, your local grassroots community radio station. The date is Saturday, June 5th, 2021, so we are live, which is great news. You can participate throughout many ways. You can participate in many ways throughout this hour. First of all, give us a call, 585-219-8889. Again, that's 585-219-8889. You can also stay in touch with us at our social media handles at Radio EOD. That, of course, stands for Radio Evidence of Design. And we're on email with evidence. No, it's radioeod@gmail.com. I think I'm still waking up. What is it? It's 11 o'clock. Yeah, I'm still waking up. That's kind of sad. It's a balmy day out there in Rochester today. The good news is that it's colder today than it will be tomorrow. So let's glass half full, I suppose. But hey, if you like the heat, more power to you. This is, I guess this is your weather. I'm not a huge fan of the heat. Not a huge fan of the heat. Matt, how do you survive in it?
I live in the basement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heat rises and all that.
Right. Yeah. I have envy for people with central air or air conditioning at all, or nice basements, I suppose, because it's kind of brutal for me. So, more power to you if you enjoy the heat. Otherwise, let's hang through it. What are we talking about on today's show? We have a number of things, folks. We will be spending the first half of the hour talking about 3 different civic opportunities that you can participate in. The first of which, the June 2020 primary election is right around the corner. The primary election day is on June 22nd, and early voting for the primary is on June 12th. That's just around a week away. There's a lot of folks up for election this season. That includes the mayor of Rochester, many city council members. Oh golly, there's so many more. I just got distracted. So a lot of folks up for re-election: mayor, city council, RCSD board of election, county legislator, and more. So we are talking about 3 different ways for you to participate in civic opportunities this hour, the first of which is the June 22nd primaries. The second of which is Rochester City Council just voted to approve the formation of a food policy council here in Rochester. This has been a somewhat long time coming, and the Food Policy Council's mission is to, well, promote for healthier, more sustainable, and equitable food policies and access here in Rochester. The application process is currently open for you to join the Food Policy Council as one of its 10 voting members. We'll talk more this hour about what the Food Policy Council will do and how you can apply to participate in the Food Policy Council and advocate for food equity here in Rochester. And the last civic opportunity that we'll discuss is how you can share your thoughts on funding for the American Rescue Plan. This was passed in the Democratic-controlled Congress and by President Joe Biden earlier this year. The Rochester region is receiving over $500 million of funding that can be spent on a lot of different things. It's very discretionary. So hopefully there'll be a lot of civic input, meaning input from folks like you, to share with our local leaders who will have the power to decide where the money goes to be spent. Again, these are hundreds of millions of dollars that the RCSD has to spend, that the city of Rochester has to spend, that Monroe County has to spend, and we should definitely share our own thoughts with our local leaders, how that money can be spent. We'll share that throughout the hour too. In the second half of today's show, we're going to be reviewing Fulfillment. That is a book by Alec MacGillis. The full title is Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One-Click America. That came out a few months-ish ago, and we'll be talking about that book today and its connection to, well, Amazon and also labor practices at large. Again, 585-219-8889 if you want to participate. Let's go ahead, though, and start by talking about the 2021 primary elections. Many offices are up for election this year, including Mayor of the City, Rochester City Council, RCSD Board of Education, and the County Legislature, among others. Note, this is a primary election. That means that you have to be registered in one of the political parties to vote in it. That's just how New York State runs its elections. So you have to be registered as a member of a political party to vote in the primary. The primary, again, is Tuesday, June 22nd, but early voting begins Saturday, June 12th. Let's just take a look at some of the offices. For Mayor of Rochester, there's Malik Evans, who currently serves on City Council, versus the incumbent Lovely Warren. Both, of course, are Democrats. There's also City Council. There are 5, I don't think my notes are right here, 5 at-large seats for City Council. There are a number of City Council seats open, and there's a lot of folks running for City Council. If you've been paying attention to the races, there's a lot of folks to choose from. City Council, of course, very important body of decision-making here in the city of the 9 members. Please do look up who's running for City Council and how you and who you'll vote for. There are a number of different newspapers and news media that have had debates with candidates or having the candidates share their thoughts. There's also the RCSD Board of Education. I believe 3 seats on the Board of Education are up for election. And also, I believe all 29 county legislators are up for election as well. There are a number of other seats in each of the different towns and suburbs around Rochester. Really important to participate in this process. You can find your specific ballot by going to monroecounty.gov/elections. Again, that's monroecounty.gov/elections. You can see exactly where you're going to vote. You can see exactly if you're registered to vote, exactly what party, if any, you're registered with, and even who is on your ballot. So you might not know, well, which district am I in? Who am I eligible to vote for? Of course, if you're in the city, anyone in the city can vote for the mayor. If you're a member of the Democratic Party, because on the Democratic primary. But the different legislator seats and maybe even the city council seats, if they're not at large, you'll have to reside in a certain area to vote for a certain candidate.
We should mention as well that if you're looking to watch the mayoral debate this coming Monday, it will be broadcast on RCTV. So if you turn to Spectrum Channel 1301 or on any of the Apple TV, Fire Stick, and Roku channels, it will also be on the radio right here on 100.9 FM WXIR. So if you're looking to tune in to the debate, that'll be Monday at 6 p.m. So that's Monday, June 7th at 6 p.m. right here.
Right. Broadcast by our very own RCTV and our WXIR. So this station will be hosting the mayoral debate between Democratic candidates Mayor Lovely Warren and City Councilman Malik Evans. I just want to spend a brief moment to share why it's so important to participate in any election, especially primary elections, especially in the city of Rochester. So most of the basically Democrats right now throughout Monroe County, and particularly in the city, are actually having elections. If you're a registered Republican, you have much less opportunities to vote in a primary this coming election because there just either aren't candidates running or the seats aren't open for incumbents or whatnot who happen to be Republican. So they're not challenged. Long story short, if you are a registered Democrat, this primary election is particularly important because there are so many seats open and are being contested in the city of Rochester. This also means, it tends to be in the city of Rochester, that if a Democrat wins in the primary election, they often do not face a challenge in November from, say, a major Republican opponent. They may face a challenge from a third-party candidate, but it's often the case that if a Democrat wins in the primary election now, they will basically be the shoe-in candidate, meaning they'll win in the general election in November and be elected to whatever office it is. So right now, this primary election is in many ways for many offices kind of like the general election. I think it's kind of safe to say for the mayor, if either Lovely Warren or Malik Evans wins in the primary election on June 22nd, they will be the next mayor of Rochester. And so this primary election is incredibly important because a lot of folks think, well, primary doesn't matter or it's not the general or whatever. No, this is very important. Many candidates who will win in the primary will basically automatically win in November. That goes for the school board as well. I don't even think there might be a Republican running for the school board. I don't know. I want to say it one way or another, but oftentimes there are not. So primary election is incredibly important to participate in. Again, Tuesday, June 22nd is primary election day. Early voting starts Saturday, June 12th. There are many, many places to vote in early voting. You can find all of this information and more at monroecounty.gov/elections. And don't forget also, as Mary just mentioned, that RCTV and WXIR will be broadcasting live a debate between the mayoral candidates on Monday, June 7th at 6 p.m. Let's transition now to talking about another great way that you can participate in a civic opportunity here in Rochester. You're listening to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. Let's talk now about the new creation of the Rochester Food Policy Council. Mary, have you heard about this?
I have not, actually, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
This is up your alley, Mary.
Yeah.
All you need is a Transportation Policy Council, and you would be good to go. So the Rochester Food Policy Council has been a long time in a coming, especially by advocates from FoodLink and other grassroots organizations and to do Common Ground Health. So Rochester City Council a few months ago approved the creation of a Food Policy Council. Its mission is to create a healthier, more inclusive food system in Rochester through a number of ways. One of those is researching, developing, and recommending food system policies. Another way they'll accomplish their mission is by advising governments and organizations on food-related plans and programs. And the third way they'll accomplish their mission is by engaging the public and building community awareness of food system issues. So if you're interested in food policy in Rochester, if you're interested in access to food, in the health of food, in the sustainability of food, the Food Policy Council is newly created to work on those things. It is resident-driven, meaning there will be 13 members of the Food Policy Council. 3 of those members will be represented permanently on the seats by 1 member of the City of Rochester, 1 member of Common Ground Health, and another member of FoodLink. The other 10 members of this council are all from residents of the City of Rochester. So that means you can apply to be on the Food Policy Council. The only requirement is you must be a city resident. You can learn how to apply at rockfoodpolicy.org. They are accepting applications for the Food Policy Council between now and the end of June. If you are a member, if you are chosen to be a member of the Food Policy Council, the terms are 2 years long, and you'll have to attend at least 6 meetings a year to, as we mentioned, advocate for better food policy changes, research food policies, and recommend food policies to local leaders. You'll be a voting member if you are chosen on this Food Policy Council as one of 13 members. Here's a really important point, though. Once the Food Policy Council is created, and there are those 10 members that are sort of chosen from the community who applied, and there's those 3 standing members from those organizations, then the Food Policy Council will create subcommittees to actually do a lot of the work to advocate for food sustainability and policy. So stay tuned, stay in touch with the Food Policy Council, because once those subcommittees are created, you can participate in them. You do not have to apply. You do not have to be accepted or chosen. You're welcome to participate in the subcommittee, and you'll work towards advancing a specific aspect of food sustainability here in Rochester. So that's a big deal. Maybe you don't want to apply for whatever reason. You're apprehensive about that, but you still want to fight for food justice. You can stay in touch with the Food Policy Council. Again, that's rockfoodpolicy.org, rockfoodpolicy.org. This is exciting.
It is, yeah. I'm wondering, I'm guessing this was backed by Councilmember Mitch Gruber.
I think so. It might have been heavily proposed by him.
Grubinator.
Well, it's like seeing that FoodLink has a part to play in it, which is not surprising. I know FoodLink has been doing a lot of work around the city of Rochester to combat food insecurity. So this is interesting. I'm curious to see where it goes, because it seems to me that, policy is one thing. I believe one barrier that I've heard to having more grocery stores in the city is something about zoning. So maybe that's something that could be looked into. But I'm curious to see what happens.
rockfoodpolicy.org to learn more and how you can apply to be a voting member of this 10 community-led person council. rockfoodpolicy.org. Let's turn our attention to the last civic opportunity we wanted to talk about in today's episode of Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. Just to remember, share your thoughts with us at 585-219-8889, whether you're in Turkey or in,
Uzbekistan.
14621. You're welcome to share your thoughts with us, 585-219-8889. You can also find us live streaming on Facebook at Radio EOD from WXAR Studios. The last thing we'll talk about for civic opportunities this hour is funding from the American Rescue Plan. Gosh golly, we have the American Rescue Plan, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, all great things besides the fact that Evidence of Design is specifically anti-jobs and anti-family, but we are pro being rescued. Sarcasm, folks. The American Rescue Plan, of course, was passed earlier this year. I don't think a single Republican voted for it in the Senate or the House.
Well, they don't want to rescue anyone. They just want everyone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
They just want all the people that didn't vote for them to die so that they can win future elections.
Or just not be able to vote. Yeah. So this terrible democratic legislation, big government grabbing us by our throats, did horrible things. Just a reminder of all the terrible things the American Rescue Plan did for us. It gave economic impact payments of $1,400 to the vast majority of Americans. That was awful. Hugely, yeah, we're super anti-universal basic income on this program. It also increased the earned income tax credit for the lowest income earners in the U.S. It created an entirely new tax credit to refund families for their costs of childcare, as we know, which is a huge burden for so many families. And it lowered or even eliminated health insurance premiums for the lowest income earners in the U.S. All terrible policies. They also increased support for homeowners, renters, and small businesses. The American Rescue Plan also expanded unemployment support, so it waives federal income taxes you have to pay on unemployment up to the first $10,200 on unemployment received. It extended the expanded unemployment benefits of an extra $300 a week to September 6th. And perhaps most infamously, because we're anti all of these things, of course, sarcasm, is that it expanded the child tax credit. This is a huge deal. So the child tax credit has been around. If you have a kid, you can, come tax season, apply for the credit and get money. You used to be able to get $2,000 for each child in the child tax credit. The American Rescue Plan expanded that amount to $3,000, so increased it by, I think, 33%. I can't do math. It went from 2,000 to 3,000. I don't know. 585-219-8889.
Let us know what the answer is.
It's a math quiz. I literally don't know. It's sad. Very sad. So it expanded the child tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000 for children aged 6 through 17. And it increased it even more for $3,600 for children under 6. So that means if you have a child, you get that much money every year from the federal government. It expanded the age eligibility from 16 years old to 17 years old. So now you are eligible to receive aid for an additional entire year when you have a child. The credit was expanded to Puerto Rico. Apparently previously it wasn't eligible there. Now Puerto Ricans can get the credit. And perhaps most importantly, the credit is fully refundable. This blew my mind. I didn't know this, but the lowest income earners, if you weren't paying income taxes or federal income taxes, you wouldn't be eligible to receive this credit. So it actually, if you're the lowest income earners, you were being punished by not receiving this credit. It removed that barrier, so it means the credit is fully refundable. So even if you don't pay taxes because of your income, you are eligible to receive this credit. And it also is in a universal basic income style, such that instead of just getting it once a year in a lump sum during tax season, you are eligible to receive it monthly, like universal basic income. I mean, I believe those payments start going out in July. So next month is, I believe, when the first monthly payments go out. I could be wrong on that.
The next month, I believe, is July. So
correct. We know that much. Don't need math to know that. I still count the months on my knuckles, so we're good. So, huge deals coming out of the American Rescue Plan. One thing we didn't mention yet, which is what we'll spend the rest of our time talking about, is $350 billion for state, local, territorial, and tribal government aid. So the American Rescue Plan did all of those things and more that we didn't mention, and has a huge billions of dollars for state and local governments to help the revenue loss from the pandemic. This is what we're talking about now. The city of Rochester is receiving $202 million from the American Rescue Plan. The RCSD is receiving nearly $197 million from the American Rescue Plan. Monroe County is receiving around $144 million from the American Rescue Plan. So just talking here in Monroe County, there's over $500 million of American Rescue Plan money coming to local jurisdictions.
That's a lot of money.
That is a ton of money. It must be spent by 2024, so it's a fast turnaround time to spend this money to see the benefits.
Actually, just real quick, you said that's $500 million coming into coming into this area.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a slight comparison, the proposed city budget for this year is $560 million.
Right.
So that's about the same amount.
Yep.
More or less.
Yep. Just
put
with
that in perspective.
Totally discretionary money, essentially. Discretionary meaning you can kind of spend it on whatever you want. So
About as much money as Michael Bloomberg spent per day on his campaign.
Yeah.
2020 presidential campaign.
In the 29 minutes we've been on air on the show, Jeff Bezos has already made twice the amount that Monroe County is receiving the American Rescue Plan, but that's neither here nor there.
Hey!
we hate increasing taxes on the 1%.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
It's awful.
I really hope people can see through my
Well, they need that
sarcasm.
money.
Yeah. They have to spend it on
They
charity.
have
Or
develop the mind meld technology that will allow us to pilot the Jaegers.
yeah, it's totally, instead of like funding the government, which can just use the money for social services, you got to leave it in the hands of billionaires to spend it on whatever form of charity they want. It's perfect sense. So, anyways, yes, Mary, it's a lot of money. The city budget is $560 million. That's about how much the Monroe County is receiving for the RCSD, the city, and Monroe County itself for the American Rescue Plan funding. But it's very discretionary. Normally, with a city budget, you have to pay for people's pensions. You got to pay for their health care. You got to pay for their wages. Stuff like that, so people can live. This money is essentially up to us to decide how we want to spend it. So it is slated to be used for things like promoting public health by mitigating the effects of COVID-19 or expanding health infrastructure. It can be spent on supporting public services at large, however we want to define a public service by a municipality. It can provide economic relief specifically to individuals, businesses, and homes. It can invest in infrastructure, water, broadband, sewers, or it can address systemic inequalities that have made the pandemic outsized negatively impact poor individuals and minority individuals. So this is highly discretionary money that can be spent on a variety of things. Lots of opportunity here to make a difference. And how can you share your thoughts? Well, through the RCSD, again receiving around $200 million, they are hosting a parent and community forum on Thursday, June 10th at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom. Thursday, June 10th at 5:30 p.m. They also have a standing online forum for you to share your feedback on. You can find this information when the forum is and the online form at rcsdk12.org/ARP. rcsdk12.org/ARP. Of course, that stands for American Rescue Plan, just as EOD stands for Evidence of Design.
Wow.
See what I did there? The city of Rochester, receiving around $200 million from the American Rescue Plan, they're holding a community telephone town hall. I know Mayor Warren loves those, on Thursday, June 17th at 7 p.m. Thursday, June 17th, 7 p.m., community telephone town hall with the city of Rochester. They, too, like the RCSD, have a standing online forum for you to share your feedback as well. You can find this information at cityofrochester.gov/ARPA. cityofrochester.gov/ARPA. I don't know how the Monroe County is asking for feedback on this money. Maybe Adam Bellows is like, nope, it's mine. No, I don't know. I did some research on it like 2 weeks ago. Couldn't find anything. But so for right now, we're just focusing on the RCSD or the city. Otherwise, you can Google around too and see how you can share your thoughts with Monroe County.
Have either of you taken the survey yet?
I have not, because I'm not a city resident. However, you don't have to be a city resident to take the city forum. They ask you at the very end, are you a city resident? And for other reasons for the RCSD, I haven't. But I'm going to, Mary. I will share my thoughts because it's really important.
Oh, I was just curious if you had an idea of what it looked like. I started the form, but sort of blanked because I hadn't actually thought about it already. And it seemed like too much, to try and give a good final thought of what I wanted the money to be used for without thinking about it first.
Yeah, so if you go to rcsdk12.org/ARP, if you look at the RCSD's form, it's very broad. It's like how would you spend money to increase like student attendance or student achievement or something like that? I mean, that's really broad. The cities is a lot more specific. Where it's
I was looking at the city's form.
Right. So the city is asking, on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever, like favorable to least favorable, would you rather we spend money on Parcel 5, on broadband, on this or that?
Libraries.
On library. Yeah. So, I don't think either one is sort of better or worse. It just sort of, they're different. And you go on there, think about it, share your thoughts, cityofrochester.gov/ARPA and rcsdk12.org/ARP. Over $500 million coming in Monroe County, highly discretionary, spent by 2024. This is essentially once in a generation type of money.
Yeah.
We just spent 3 years with the RCSD about budget crises and layoffs and this and that, and the RCSD is getting hundreds of millions of dollars that completely absolves their budget crisis.
Yeah.
In the short term, it doesn't reduce their structural deficits that are inherent in the budget. And the Children's Agenda, among others, have done great work on that. But, it's like it just goes from problem, solved, besides the structural issue. So really important that there's community input on these because we want the money to be spent in a good way.
It's pretty amazing what government intervention can do.
It's almost like government exists to ensure that as a society, our needs are met. It's almost like that. And that government has the power to make our lives better.
What?
It's pretty great. So, you've been listening to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. We just talked about 3 different civic opportunities that you can participate in. Right now, the June 22nd primaries are coming up. The newly created Food Policy Council, you can apply to be a member of it. And sharing your thoughts on spending money for the American Rescue Plan. We are going to pivot now and talk about a book review for Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One Click America by Alec MacGillis. In the meantime, share your thoughts with us as we take a short break at 585-219-8889. Hang on.
Airwaves by Kraftwerk.
And this is Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. That was extraterrestrial, my man. That was tubular. Is tubular ever worth saying?
Totally.
Totally tubular.
What's that guitar surfing? The surf guitar movement music?
Surf guitar?
Is that
surf
just what
music?
it's called? Yeah. Surf music is super tubular.
That wasn't surf music, but
Right.
I was a little worried on the first notes. I thought maybe my eardrums were going to explode.
yeah,
Yeah.
It just like kept the
Getting
frequency
louder.
kept going higher.
That's
I was like, oh no.
That's the UFO just getting closer and closer to your
Yeah, it's-
brainstem.
Yeah. I'm probably
do a
already abducted
oblongata.
and I just haven't noticed. Ah, well.
Did you all see the report that's coming out from the federal government about the UFOs? Remember a few years ago?
Yeah.
The Navy released the footage of like the F-18 Super Hornets pilots that saw this UFO in the sky, and they sort of released that classified information. And it's like, oh my, the pilots are saying like, oh my God, what is that? And so there's been a hubbub over the past couple of years about, is there actually UFOs and this and that? And
I mean, UFO literally just is unidentified flying object. Like, of course there are UFOs.
Right.
But
Mary, have you seen the video?
I have not. I don't actually know what you're talking about, and
Oh.
I'm just thinking about Twin Peaks.
All right, we will definitely show you the video later. I've been a believer, Roswell, New Mexico. I'm a believer.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I have no idea what to think. Besides that, we should tax the wealthy. That's all I know.
That is a good thing to have a strong belief in.
Speaking of taxing the wealthy, Mary, you
Yes.
read Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One Click America by Alec MacGillis.
I sure did.
I don't know how to read and Matt doesn't read, so only you read this book, and we're hoping that you can let us know about it. So
That's a lot of pressure, Jason, but I think I can do that.
So the book is, from my understanding, the book is kind of ostensibly about Amazon, right? It kind of centers Amazon, but I think the book tells us a lot more than just Amazon. What is the book about?
It does, yes. It's not, as the book says on the cover, it's not just another expose of this huge multi-billion-dollar company that is destroying people's lives.
And producing goods and services.
Yeah, that too, I guess.
Great discounts.
But Amazon plays a part in every chapter of this book and is an integral part of the book. But
every chapter of human history going forward.
Yes. But it is not, at the same time, not exactly the focus of the book. The focus of the book is the people who live in areas of the country that have been kind of cast into shadow in the time that Amazon has become a large entity in the country. And this doesn't just go for Amazon. This also, is the same case for other large companies like Walmart or, other companies that don't treat their workers well. So it follows the story of cities, and it follows the story of people and how those cities and those people have, kind of fallen into shadow in the wake of Amazon, because Amazon has had a way of deciding which parts of the country are going to succeed and which parts of the country are not.
Tell us about one of those ways that Amazon has, on a large scale, changed sort of our social lives and impacted people. We know there's a lot of criticism about Amazon now, but like, oh my God, do the workers pee in bottles? Amazon forces people not to unionize. They don't pay workers as well as they could. It's backbreaking work. And we're like, we know how to fix that. Treat human beings better. But the story of Amazon is much larger, and I think that's what this book gets into. Can you give us an example of one way that Amazon has sort of changed our social lives?
Sure. And I think the best way to kind of think about this is to look at each chapter individually. So each chapter follows a specific city or area of the country that has been changed by Amazon in some way. Some of them are like Seattle, which has prospered in a very extreme way for many citizens, and also the homelessness rate has risen extensively. But it goes into the history of this place and usually follows a person or several people throughout their lives and how this place has changed. So one of the examples is a point close to Baltimore. I read this like last week, but I unfortunately am blanking on the specific name. But it's an area that had been used for steel production from starting in the late 1800s. And, steel production was dangerous work. People got injured a lot. A lot of people died in producing steel. You're around a lot of heat and very hot metal, and that can be dangerous, certainly. And that ended up developing an area where workers had great unions because the workers came together. They decided they didn't want to be working in these dangerous conditions anymore, or at least have better compensation if they were going to. And so the city developed around the workers' needs. They had better paying jobs, they had schools, they had housing that was subsidized usually by the company. And at the end of the time that this company existed, I believe this particular one was Bethlehem Steel out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the workers in these unions were making over $30 an hour. They had benefits, they had vacation, their families were well off, and then it went bankrupt. And that same space has been taken over by Amazon. And there's actually one particular worker who's returned to multiple times throughout the book, who works for Amazon now, but used to actually work for the steel company. It just happened that when the steel company went bankrupt, his pension was cut. He had actually retired 10 years before. His pension was cut, and he had to go back to work because his pension wasn't covering what he needed anymore. And on that same exact location is an Amazon warehouse and other warehouses that are now paying an average of like $16 an hour, which, sounds fine. But when you compare it with the history of what happened with these workers who were in dangerous positions, who came together and were able to fight for their own labor rights, it's like you've come back to the beginning. You've come back to the late 1800s, and now we're there again with Amazon, with workers doing dangerous and not always dangerous in the same way. You know, their bodies aren't always in danger. But from what I have read and what I've heard in other places, it's very isolating work. So it's not just dangerous in a physical way, but sometimes in a mental way too.
And so Amazon, of course, has become the second largest private employer in the United States, only behind Walmart. And it has something I didn't know that I learned from this book is that it has sort of tiers of employees, tiers of employment, and it has created sort of winners and losers across the country. You might be describing in this story of this individual who used to work for a unionized steel mill and is now back to work for Amazon, more of a sort of loser side of Amazon's services. For instance, the highest tier for Amazon might be its sort of tech hubs, its software development, its cloud computing, really wealthy areas typically, really highly educated individuals, really highly paid. And then you go down to, at the bottom is perhaps its distribution centers, its warehouses.
The fulfillment centers.
The fulfillment, indeed.
Self-fulfilling.
Tell us about this propensity to create winners and losers through Amazon's, just business practices, whether intentional or not. How has that manifestation affected our social lives and geography?
Sure. So this is, the main point of the book. And so it's kind of hard to just sum up in a way.
Here's the punchline.
Yeah. But so as I mentioned, each chapter goes into a different city, follows different people, and follows the way that Amazon has affected that city. And it doesn't always start with Amazon. Often MacGillis starts with the history of the city and sort of how that area has been set up so that Amazon will utilize it in the way that it is using it now. Amazon didn't create these structures, like the Beth Steel plant. That structure and that sort of work, the sort of blue-collar work, was already there. They're just taking advantage of the loss of that good work, like well-paid blue-collar work, and are replacing it with something because they can then say, something's better than nothing. So that, I think, is one of the most interesting parts of the book, is that it doesn't just talk about Amazon. It talks about how the infrastructure was already there that Amazon could then take advantage of. But there is, as you mentioned, a sort of hierarchy within Amazon workers, and the cities and areas reflect that. So Seattle, for example, was not an accident. Choosing Seattle as a headquarters was not an accident. It's very close to a lot of tech workers, but it's not California because they didn't want to pay California taxes. And so areas seem to have been chosen to avoid having to pay large amounts in taxes. So they avoided going to high population states. Yet it's close enough. I believe they actually were, or maybe this was Microsoft. They were based in Arizona, and then they were like, no one's going to come to Arizona. Where can we go that we could convince people to move in order to get a job? And Microsoft moved to Seattle. Amazon also decided to set up headquarters in Seattle. And Seattle has become one of those winner cities. So on the other hand, there are kind of two other types of places that are talked about. There are the fulfillment centers, which tend to crop up in areas where there used to be manufacturing, such as the steel manufacturing, or so that was a company that was creating U.S. Steel and then went bankrupt. Another sort of example are in the Midwest, where there may have been factories and those companies still exist, may still have their headquarters there, but the manufacturing was outsourced to other countries where they could pay laborers lower wages. So there is still manufacturing there, or still a manufacturing company there, but not manufacturing, and those people need jobs. So Amazon moves in and takes over the warehouse space in some cases, or just takes over the, kind of moves in to say, hey, here, we're offering these jobs. And they're never as well paid. as the ones that people had before. The other one that is interesting and that I hadn't thought about as much are data centers. So as we all know, Amazon is a massive online marketplace that stores tons and tons and tons of information. And the information doesn't just exist in a cloud, even though that's exactly what it's called. It has to live in a physical form somewhere. And so Amazon, like Microsoft and Google and Facebook, have built massive data centers that are just full of servers. And those have to go somewhere. And they tend to go places where people aren't going to be able to put up a fight about having a big, ugly building in their backyard or, in their neighborhood. A lot of those seem to be in Virginia or like in the East Coast. There usually aren't a lot of people in the area. They also don't bring in any jobs.
Right.
And they still get tax cuts for building something there, even though they'll bring in maybe a dozen jobs for upkeep of the area. So that's kind of it's hard to know whether that could be considered a winner or a loser area. It's just probably a loser area in Amazon's thought, because it's not bringing in really anything, but the governments are still trying to incentivize Amazon to come in.
Speaking of government, and we're reviewing Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One-Click America. That's a book by Alec MacGillis, and you're listening to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM, WXIR in Rochester. In the last remaining moment we have, Mary, speaking of government, what has Amazon's relationship been like with government? You mentioned there are tax breaks. My understanding, there's also lobbying, open door policies where folks from government go into Amazon or vice versa. Tell us about Amazon's relationship with government and how that has affected our social lives as well.
Amazon's relationship with the government, both federal and municipal, has really grown as it has grown. As you mentioned, it is one of the largest employers in the United States, and so the general feeling that I got from this book is that governments are openly desperate for Amazon to bring jobs to their area, because they think that they can then be one of those winner areas, even if all they're getting is a fulfillment center. In order to bring Amazon to the area, so this is one aspect of generally municipal government relationship with Amazon, they often offer huge tax breaks in order for Amazon to build. And that's one of the ways that Amazon gets out of paying taxes. On a more federal level, they do have massive amounts of lobbying. So just trying to get laws that will benefit them, make them more profitable. And it doesn't hurt that Jeff Bezos owns a major national newspaper, the Washington Post. So that does, I don't know that is a direct effect, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, of all the newspapers to buy, you buy the one in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, yeah.
I certainly think there is something to that. Am I correct in thinking that there's a lot of officials, say, from the Obama administration, other officials who've left government and gone to work for Amazon?
Yes, that is something that comes up in the book a lot. So not only that they've gone to work for Amazon, but the number of people who have left Congress and have gone on to become lobbyists has become much higher. I believe it was in the single digits in like the 80s, and now it's closer to 40% of people who are leaving Congress go off and become lobbyists. And where are they going to become lobbyists for? Who knows? But Amazon is one of the big people that they might become lobbyists for, or they may work for a lobbying firm. And guess what? Probably Amazon works with a lot of lobbying firms around the city. But it is also the case that people who will be very successful in a government position aren't necessarily looking for that to be their end goal. And government positions may not be able to pay as much as a private company that's extremely wealthy. And so there are people who are successful there was a story of one woman in particular who was extremely successful in the Obama campaign and in his administration, and who then went on to work for Amazon. And her job was procuring office supplies, which is sort of something that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being a super lucrative position, but governments need a lot of office supplies, and that was very lucrative for Amazon to get her.
This book is called Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One-Click America by Alec MacGillis. Mary, thanks for reading so Matt and I didn't have to.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Also, if you would like to read this, you can get it from the library. That's where I got it.
Hey, you can also order it off Amazon.
Yes, but please don't.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's hilarious.
Of course.
Yeah. Never mind. We have to end today's show, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. Just a reminder, the June 2020 primary elections are coming up. Early voting begins on June 12th. You can also apply to join the newly created Rochester Food Policy Council, and you can share your thoughts with how the City of Rochester and the RCSD should spend its hundreds of millions of dollars of American Rescue Plan funding. Thanks so much for joining or listening to your local grassroots community radio station. I was your host, Jason Taylor, joined by my good friends and co-hosts, Matt Treadwell.
See you later.
And Mary Lawrence.
All the best.
You can always find our past episodes on YouTube, or they're available as a podcast wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, be well, be safe, stay cool, take care, and bye-bye.